that initiative about inclusive capitalism and about social responsibility of the businesses. And another piece in 1970 is Milton Friedman, the Nobel Economics Prize winner, who says that the social responsibility of the business is to make more profit, period. If you would like, please look it up. It's really an interesting read by both of these articles. So with this kind of background, although I don't see, but I hope we have with us, we have the honor of having His Excellency Ambassador of the UK in Lithuania, Mr. Brian Olley, and I would like to pass the floor to him.
Yes, thank you very much. For some inexplicable reason, my name is Brian Olley, but I'm being shown as Pascal, which is rather worrying. But I assure you I'm here as the British ambassador. Thank you so much for that introduction, and a very warm welcome to all our participants and to all our speakers today. You may ask, why is the British ambassador to Lithuania opening a debate on responsible capitalism? It's a good question. But first of all, of course, because this is the British Chamber of Commerce event, and secondly, because I've seen at first hand over the years and in many different countries the terrible impact. If we're talking about responsible capitalism, I've seen the terrible impact of responsible capitalism. Mining companies exploiting desperately poor African countries, construction companies building roads that go nowhere, flats that the local people don't use because they're either in the wrong place or they're very poorly constructed. I've seen companies building football stadia in the middle of tropical forests, knowing very well that after the single football championship, they will then be left to rot in the jungle for the next 20 years. And I've had gambling companies coming into my office in the embassy in various countries trying to persuade me to support their bids to get a license to profit from the desperate and the poor who will gamble anything just to try and get a few $100s. So these, of course, are obvious examples of irresponsible capitalism. And it's easy to say that this is the unacceptable side of capitalism, but the fact is, every day, whether we're in Vilnius, in Lithuania, in UK, in every country, we're all faced with situations where we're being incentivized to maximize profits for our shareholders or the owners of private businesses. And this pressure for financial performance drives us to micro behaviors which we can convince ourselves are responsible. So I'd just like to spend a minute or two just asking ourselves as to what is behavior which is compatible with responsible capitalism. And I'd be really interested to hear in the debate today about not just what it is, what do we mean by responsible capitalism, but how can we move from today's situation where most of us perhaps know how to define it, but how can we make it happen in a meaningful way? How can governments, how can the British government and regulators in Lithuania and other countries, how can we change the rules and the incentives so that there's a real step change in behavior? Now, before coming to Lithuania, I spent 2 years working in the City of London for a bank. And we spent a lot of time asking ourselves questions about what is our purpose and how can we properly support our ESG, our environmental, social and governance targets. But the real purpose of the bank fundamentally was not surprisingly, was to make money for the shareholders, and performance was judged as in almost all publicly quoted companies on a quarterly profit and loss basis. So how does this compare with the definition of purpose in a responsible capitalism context? Now, if we look at the example, I can give you, I can point you towards a particular website and an organization which I've personally had experience of dealing with. I know the chief executive quite well, and I think it's a really useful place to go. It's called A Blueprint for Better Business. A Blueprint for Better Business. You may have come across it. And it defines responsible capitalism as a purpose-led business. A purpose-led business. It has a purpose which serves society. And it envisages a positive impact on the world. It has a clear and credible narrative which links the purpose of the business to the strategy and to the outcomes. And it also includes not just financial outcomes, but non-financial outcomes as well. And it urges us to look at business as a set of relationships, which this chimes with what I've seen around the world. We need businesses not just to be thinking about the relationship with its shareholders, but also the relationships with its employees, with its suppliers, with its society, and the impact on society. And this sounds a bit, but most importantly, looking at the business being a guardian for future generations. So it's pointing us towards the long-term impact. So what is a good purpose? Now, we would ask ourselves in the bank, and I'd ask myself as well when people come into my office looking for my support to try and sell their deal to the local government in whichever country I'm working in. And ultimately, it needs to be three things. It needs to be, the purpose needs to be inspiring, it needs to be practical, and it needs to be authentic. Inspiring, practical, and authentic. And I'll come back to these in a minute with a practical example. So how can we incentivize businesses to be responsible capitalists? And how can we put regulations in place or incentives that make companies, businesses behave in a responsible way? Now, of course, we all know this is hugely difficult. But let me give you an example that we can just use as a basis for our discussion. And that is the example of the bank. I won't give you the name of the bank, but nonetheless, you may be able to guess. Of course, the chief executive's purpose is quite well known. It is helping Britain prosper. The bank, when the chief executive took over several years ago now, he's about to move on, in fact, but he decided that that was the purpose of the bank, to help Britain prosper. And as a result of that, the bank actually withdrew from most of the world. It had offices all over the world, but it focused on this core purpose of helping Britain prosper. So going back to the three tests then, is it a purpose-driven organization? I'd say yes, it is. It's got a purpose. Is it inspiring? Personally, I found that quite inspiring. I found that really helped me to understand what the bank was about. Is it so you know, it's inspiring? Is it authentic? Yes, I think it's authentic. I could understand what it was about. And is it practical? That's the last test. I think there I'm a little more ambivalent. It's a maybe. I'm not sure it's a firm yes. On the positive side, this was definitely not just a marketing strapline for the marketeers. It's not just something for the adverts. No, we lived it. Our decisions were tested against it. We rejected some deals because they didn't meet the test. But did this make us an example of an organization living and implementing responsible capitalism? Maybe. I suppose it depends on how much you like bankers. So much for our processes being led by this purpose. And as well as that, as everybody in the financial world will know, the strict banking regulations now are so tight compared with the Wild West days of pre-2008. But ultimately, despite this clear purpose, our business was driven by two factors. First of all, profit and loss. This quarterly requirement to report on how were we doing, and that had to go to the shareholders. So how soon would the deal produce a profit, how much profit, and for how long? And the second test that drove the business was what's the risk? Now, the credit teams were all powerful as they are in any bank, particularly now post 2008. And there was an essential division of responsibility between the teams and those of us who were trying to do the deals, quite rightly. So we couldn't sign off our own deals without the credit team. And so as part of the credit team analysis, they'd also look at whether it fitted the purpose. So did it fit with the Helping Britain Prosper purpose? I have to say it was a little less stringent on this, and it was open to different interpretations. But overall, I'd say it was pretty impressive scrutiny. So what was missing? And for me, what was missing, there was no real assessment of the ESG factors, apart from as part of the risk to the brand. Would activists target the bank because of a deal? Would the bank suffer financially, or would the brand be damaged by association with a deal? And we protect ourselves by different processes with, obviously knowing our customer, anti-money laundering processes. One particular example was we closed down all accounts because of particular announcements over the implementation of Sharia law by a certain country, because that was clearly, as far as we were concerned, contrary to the purpose of the bank and also contrary to our brand. But there was no real assessment against clear ESG impact. So coming to the last bit, then just finally, what would I like to see changing over the coming years? We need to make progress on formalizing what we mean by positive impact on society. Going back to this blueprint for a better business, this positive impact on society. What is truly sustainable, and how do we create the conditions where it's not simply a question of profitability for the business? So to finish just with a few thought-provoking examples of people who've walked into my office and embassies around the world, perhaps, just to give you some real-life examples I've faced. A company comes in to see me and tells me that 99.5% of its packaging is recyclable. And when I ask the company representatives how much of the packaging is actually recycled, he's got no idea. Another example, a big multinational comes in and asks me to support their launching of alcoholic drinks business in the country where I'm the ambassador. And I asked them about the impact on society of their business. Is it positive? And so they replied to me that they have got a program to make 5 million drivers of cars understand how dangerous it is to drink and drive. And they've got another program about educating young people about the dangers of drinking. Is that enough to consider their business as being responsible? And finally, when I fly from Vilnius with a certain low-cost airline, the stewardess asked me if I'd like to contribute some money to a charity run by the airline, which plants trees so the passengers can then offset the carbon emissions from the jet engines of the plane. So this intrigues me. So I do a bit of research, and then after having a Google internet search and doing some looking at the facts behind this, I find out that actually the company is only planting enough trees from the money that's given to them every year to offset the carbon emissions from 4 mid-European flights, compared with the 50,000 flights per year. So again, is that enough to make them a responsible capitalist company? I'll leave that to you. So thank you so much. And I'm looking forward very much to this debate. This is a subject very close to my heart.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much. And this is really thought-provoking. And I will now move, conscious of time, immediately to our next speaker. Next speaker is Mr. Tomas Kontautas, who is Lloyd's General Representative for Lithuania. And Asta, if you could please put on a slide that Tomas has sent us. And Tomas, please, the floor is yours. And please, all speakers, please keep to the time. I'm sorry for repeating this. I will do it quite often today.
Thank you, Vilius, for kind introduction. Asta, are you putting the slide, or should I share it? I can do it immediately.
I think it's coming on.
Okay. So today I have a chance to represent Lloyd's of London, which operates in Lithuania out of Belgium, but still is backed by the syndicates in London. So the first area I wanted to touch and be very specific, because the topic of responsible capitalism is really broad. I would say that the first area is climate change and where insurers can contribute. Because it's pretty obvious when we talk about emissions and etc. We imagine all these factories, imagine transport companies, imagine agricultural companies using fertilizers, but with insurance, it's just, the service. How can it affect climate change? And in fact, there are a couple of moments. Firstly, insurers can check what kind of risks they undertake. So this is important element, educating Lloyd's market players to look at the ones who are not really engaged in sustainable businesses. Second element, I think worthy to mention, that insurers, by means of collecting premiums, accumulate quite a few billions of capital. So, for example, Lloyd's writes about 25 billion pounds a year, and out of this money, the investment is coming. And here, besides the kind of underwriting, there is another area where the insurers can affect the climate change, looking where you are investing. So screen and invest only to those sectors and those companies who are less carbon intensive. And when it comes specifically to the corporation of Lloyd's itself, what can Lloyd's an organization do besides supervising the market players which operate in Lloyd's? There are a few initiatives worthy to mention. So firstly, Lloyd's checks greenhouse emissions from its global operations. So each year, the company called Aviva monitors and issues the report. Second important aspect, that Lloyd's purchases 100% renewable electricity for offices in London and Kent. All Lloyd's offices, in fact, are going to this so-called leadership in energy and environmental design certification, and already 4 offices have it and 2 offices are in process. And when you think about Lloyd's building in Lime Street 1, which is in fact look like a factory, but it's a place where insurance is underwritten. So all lighting is LED based. And also when it comes to investment of its own fund or central fund, as we used to call. So here the main focus is to screen the investments in companies heavily associated with coal. So I believe the example shows that firstly, it starts from yourself. You have to have clear agendas as a company, and then spread these ideas to the market you are working with. Encourage taking sustainable risks in terms of underwriting, and encouraging sustainable investment in terms of investment of assets covering technical provisions. So briefly, that's it from my side. Happy to hear other participants.
Tomas, thank you very much. I'm sure we may have questions, and special thanks for keeping to the time. So really, you can tell a good lawyer by that. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Vilius.
Now the next speaker is Ms. Asta Grabinske. Asta is CEO and chair of the board of Aviva Lietuva. So Asta, please, the floor is yours. With your vast experience in the financial sector, I'm sure you have a lot to share about responsible capitalism.
Good afternoon, and really I am pleased to talk today and to reassure our British ambassador that Aviva Lithuania, as a subsidiary of one of the largest British insurance group, entered Lithuania 20 years ago. And in fact, we came with a concept of social responsibility. And we used to be pioneers in this area in Lithuania. We worked together with the UN office in promoting the concept of being socially responsible, of taking care of various stakeholders, not only of the financial interest and financial return, and really promoted this concept among the local businesses. So I'm really glad that now this sector is flourishing in Lithuania, and I believe we have at least some small credit in there. Just answering the question, today we are on kind of different level again. We ask ourselves, is it really politically correct to maximize profit, to be financially profitable? And certainly as managing business, my answer is yes, but maybe the question is how we see this profit today. Is it really just financial return to the investor, or is it a broader return to the whole society? So then perhaps when calculating profit, we shall take all costs into account, environmental, social cost, and all the examples Ambassador was given, I think, is at the beginning of his speech. This is exactly the path we shall not go on as international business, as responsible business. And yes, Aviva, as international insurance giant, of course, does a lot in climate area, in different areas, because basically you have to be a good world citizen to develop your business. You take responsibility, but also large corporations, sometimes they are more powerful than some countries. So they have big budgets, they have big influence, and they can change the world. And especially insurance business is in general per se interested in safer world, more predictable world, because you want to insure assets, people, and big dramatic changes in climate, for example, they prevail from doing your business. But coming back to Lithuania, here locally, we continue our responsible activities, we believe, and this year in particular is a special year. So we partnered with the Red Cross here and donated quite substantial money to help with a special alert system for elderly people, for them to be able getting some help with the daily operations when they are in lockdown and cannot leave their home. We financed volunteers, and in every year, of course, we do a lot. We already donated, I would say, tons of blood and did spring cleaning in many cities in Lithuania every year. And we are doing mapathons, mapping maps in Africa, remote areas. So really our people is engaged. But generally, I believe we have to do all the social activity. We have to be a good citizen in the society, good member of the community. But most importantly, I think as for finance industry, we really shall have our clear purpose, and we shall put our customer first, as our customer are entrusting their financial future, their pensions to us. So it's of our primarily responsibility still to our customers to do everything that they are happy. So we measure it every year, and I am proud to say today that 85% of our customers say they are happy with our service. And majority of them also see good value for money. We pay out the largest amounts of benefits in Lithuania for recent 10 years. So I believe this is really things that we shall be proud, and this is our purpose. But is it ideal? It's not ideal yet in insurance sector, and I think it deserves a larger debate. What can be done? How shall we change our activities? How shall we be more accessible, for example, for disadvantaged groups and so on? But of course, there is a time pressure, so perhaps this requires a different, separate discussion. But I think we should partner here with the public sector, and regulation is tough on the finance industry, but it is really required. So we shall have quite a few discussions for the future to agree what standards shall be set for all of us to enter and to keep it up. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Asta. Thank you. And I'm sure there will be questions at the end. And I encourage you once again to ask your questions in the chat. Now, the next speaker is Mr. Tony Bishop. He is CEO of Schage. Schage is a real estate developer who are developing really wonderful buildings in Lithuania, and I can testify to that personally because we are staying, our office is staying in one of those buildings, and they are really very convenient and very environmentally friendly. So Tony, please, the floor is.
Before I get into trouble, I will just point out I'm not the CEO, I'm the leasing director, but not a problem. So I've just been asked to give a quick, if you like, case study on how we built Quadrum, which is a large office project in the centre of Vilnius. Property developers tend not to have a good reputation when it comes to perhaps responsible capitalism and social responsibility and environment, etc. But I'm going to hope I can demonstrate what we did to mitigate some of that and to do the best we could. So I'm going to divide that into 5 areas very quickly: the purchase, the design of the project, the construction, the leasing, and the sale. The purchase was bought, we had to buy a Lithuanian UAB company which held the land, and that was owned by many shareholders, some very small, some had even died. So it was very difficult to trace those people and then to make sure that we did it properly so that everybody gets a fair opportunity and a fair price for their shares. Doing it properly took us 3 years, but we believe that that was the best way to go forward. And the benefit for us, of course, is we have no legal problems in the future by doing it properly. Then with the design, we again wanted to be transparent. So we asked the Lithuanian Architectural Union to prepare an international tender, and they had 7 seats at the board for the decision making. We had 2. So again, it was very impartial and a fair, open system for all architects, and we end up choosing a Norwegian and Lithuanian architect. The construction, from sort of the transparency point of view, we went out to tender, 6 or 7 companies for the tender. And we also employed a construction management company to give another level to check on their work on the tenders, but also, of course, on the costs to make sure that that was all done correctly. And then we were able to focus on what we feel is quite important, perhaps, to this topic, is introducing BREEAM, which is an independent organisation that gives out awards and qualifications to hundreds of thousands of buildings, particularly office buildings around the world, which means that tenants and people who don't know anything about property can very quickly and easily compare buildings for their energy efficiency, for their sustainability, for the general quality, and they have ratings of good, very good, poor. We have ratings of very good and excellent. And that means that we had to invest a lot more time in energy saving devices, LED lighting, for example. We even reused some of the concrete from the previous building, geothermal. So it's very important for us to do as much as we can for technology, environment, and energy saving. Then we went into the leasing. Again, tenders for real estate companies to provide us with good companies, and then we would finalize the agreements. But more important is to give a good service to the tenants, and so that we build the trust of our clients, and that we hope that they will stay with us in that building and in the future. Once the building was leased, we then had to sell it, and that involved inviting over 100 international investment funds through real estate companies, and we eventually found one company that we were comfortable with to buy it, and they of course then went to buy it. But as part of that process, we used a member of our board. We asked them if they could get involved as well. So again, keeping it very transparent, very open, so that we again don't have any problems in the future. So really, what we've done, particularly with this BREEAM award, is create a first in Lithuania, introduce that. Now most buildings have that sort of qualification they have to get, so that everybody knows where they stand with their buildings for the tenants. And doing so, the Quadrum project has won many awards in the Baltics and in Lithuania, so we're quite proud of that. But I think it helps ultimately, of course, to maximize our profits, which the ambassador was saying is one point, but also it gives us a good reputation locally and internationally to do future business. So the whole package, not just making profits, but it helps. That's what we've hoped to achieve with our project here.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you very much. And this is really interesting. And I think one idea just for all of us to remember is really good. I mean, being a responsible business doesn't mean being less profitable or somehow hurting your business for that, for being a good citizen. So that's a great idea for the discussion, I think. So now let's move to Brussels. And please let me welcome Joost Visser, CEO and co-founder of Tiawa. And Joost is joining us from Brussels. So thank you very much for taking your time. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vilius. Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador, other speakers and participants. Also, thank you, Asta and the BCCL team for inviting me to speak about Connects, which is a global matchmaking and community management platform for chambers of commerce and their members. To date, we host more than 40 chambers in 30 different countries with more than 23,000 of their members in over 80 countries around the world, including BCCL and also the British Chamber of Commerce in Belgium. As you can see behind me, our motto is it takes a community to build a business. Connects positions chambers as trusted local nodes in a global digital network, strengthening their local business communities. Our vision is to create a truly global business community for SMEs, a global level playing field, enabling SMEs and their business networks to enjoy the benefits of digitalization and internationalization just as much as large corporations do. The COVID-19 crisis has been a great accelerator of global trends. Some companies are racing ahead, while others, particularly SMEs around the world, are in fact struggling. And pandemics or not, SMEs, they will continue to be the backbone of all economies around the world, where most of the innovation and job creation takes place. And there will be no sustainable, healthy global economy if SMEs can't thrive. Now, for SMEs and their stakeholders to become more resilient, it is essential that they collaborate in communities of like-minded participants with a common purpose and interests in an environment that is inclusive, accessible, and helpful. And SMEs must collaborate with other SMEs, but also with larger corporate entities. This is essential, although the motivations for collaborations will probably differ. For SMEs, it is mainly about having access to knowledge, business opportunities, and growth. For large organizations, it's probably more about the topic we are discussing today, the license to operate. It was mentioned by the ambassador, the ESG goals, and having access to innovation and new ideas. And that is why we believe chambers are so well placed to service the wider business community in a digital world, because their membership is a mix of SMEs and larger organizations, and they have a common culture and a common set of values. And this brings me to the importance of shared values. It's not mentioned yet today, but there's a very famous phrase from the legendary management consultant Peter Drucker, is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And you can say the same for values. Of course, it's not enough to have your values on a plaque on the wall in your office and only play lip service to it. Your company's values need to drive everything you do. And I wanted to share our values, the Connects values, and how they drive everything that we do. Our first and foremost value is community ethos. We believe communities of people are fundamental to the well-being of all humans. And it is these connections and the active networks that encourages communication and openness with one another, fueling personal growth. And this extends further to the business world as we connect and broker relationships. This was mentioned earlier as well. Only through trusted networks can we develop business friendships and encourage healthy business relationships. Our second value is authenticity. Having authenticity is a key component to trust. In business, authentic means showing transparency, proving legitimacy, aligning to organizations that validate a company's trust, such as chambers of commerce. And the Connects platform relies on these connections because this is the primary ingredient that demonstrates business authenticity and allows business relationships to foster and grow. Third, value enterprising attitudes, as we expect our users to be entrepreneurial and forward-thinking, so too must be our team. Our fourth value is respect for provenance. Creating global connections always sounds great, but it should never supersede the power of provenance. For example, the sparkling wine Champagne would never have the global recognition it has today if it wasn't for the Champagne region of France. A product's provenance tells a story of authenticity, trust, and quality. That's why it's important to respect each other's participating chambers' location, culture, language, and customs, because in doing so, we better understand the businesses that are connected with our platform. Our fifth and final value is we are human. Connect is a platform that could be described as a matchmaking tool for business, but behind every business are people, individuals, and personalities, each with their unique needs. So that's it for me. Happy to take any questions later. If you want to know more about Connects, please contact me or my colleagues, Carolina and Leila, who are also joining the call. On December the 21st, there's another BCCL event that will talk about Connects and how to use the platform and its benefits. Thank you. Thank you,
Joost. Thank you. This is really interesting, and we can see that business lives in an ecosystem. So that's why NGOs and other societies are really, really important also for this topic of today. The next speaker is Dr. Ozan Øzerk. I'm very sorry if I'm mispronouncing. Founder of OpenPayd and European Merchant Bank. And very warm welcome, Ozan, and thank you for joining. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I want to discuss today's topic, responsible capitalism, through the eyes of a young entrepreneur. I grew up in Norway and was involved in several startups there, and I also worked as a medical doctor in Norway. I've been very fortunate in my life. I have been working in some of the most stable countries in the world, as Norway, as UK, but I also seen failed states at Iraq, at being present there on the ground. So I can say that I have kind of seen the capitalism at its best and also at its worst. Let me explain very briefly what OpenPayd does. My company, OpenPayd, provides other businesses banking and payment services. This is, for my clients, this is the very lifeline of their existence. If you as a business are not able to send, receive, exchange, or store money, there is no way you can exist as a company. So I believe companies like OpenPayd is very important if we believe in responsible capitalism. For me, the word responsible is very much related to being fair and inclusive. And any business that aims to act responsible needs to be sure they act fair and inclusive to the employees of the business, the community they operate in, their suppliers, and the environment. So OpenPayd in particular have a responsibility to grant other businesses market access by providing them services. We as a company must play the role as an enabler and not as a gatekeeper. The mindset of an enabler is the one that sees opportunities and seeks cooperation rather than one seeing obstacle and confrontation. This is a very important mindset to embrace in order to be able to act fair and inclusive. OpenPayd's headquarters is here in London. I'm in London at the moment, but we have sister offices across the world, and we have companies we are attached with also in Lithuania. So having employees from all around the world is a direct result of globalization. 50 years ago or 70 years ago, this would have been very unlikely. But this very globalization that has resulted in enormous wealth creation for some have also left a lot of people behind. Large populations across the world have not been benefiting the same way I have or my companies have. So for me as a founder, diversity, equal opportunity, social responsibility are all key elements when we hire new team members and set up new offices. As an example, in OpenPayd, we don't have an HR department. However, we have a people and talent team. At OpenPayd, we don't see each other as resources of different departments, but we see each other as talented members of a team. For me, this represents the very essence of responsible capitalism. I also want to touch on a value that has been kind of my driving force, and that's fair market access, and financial inclusion. In today's speech, I touched about being regulated and that being regulated meant increased scrutiny. And it's this very scrutiny that increases the barriers to enter the markets. If the barriers are there to keep bad players out of the game, that's fair and responsible. But far too often I see that these barriers are very unfair, making the strong stronger and the weak weaker. Startups, companies from emerging markets, smaller financial institutions in general are not giving fair access to the market, often with the reason that they represent some kind of risk for the larger financial institution that will bank them. However, I believe that giving businesses, especially from emerging markets, smaller financial institutions, and innovative startups fair access to the financial markets is the very essence of what responsible capitalism is. The impact of such businesses have on their local community, their suppliers, their partners can't be emphasized enough. Today's banking system was created long before globalization, long before the internet. So when I hear regulators and others speak about buzzwords like open banking and GDPR, I truly believe this is not enough to prepare liberal societies that we value for the challenges of the future. If we as democratic nations cherish our own values, we need to kind of stand our ground. We need to lead the way and make it easier to trade in US dollar, euro, and other currencies of democratic nations. If liberal governments and its institutions are sincere about responsible capitalism, because they use this buzzword all the time, then their currencies should be the easiest one to access, and not leaving this responsibility in the hands of a few global clearing banks and letting oppressive regimes take the lead on digitalization. Our central banks, and I know Bank of Lithuania have been leading this way on this one, should quickly adopt the idea of digital currencies, the blockchain, open up for direct deposits, but not only their own local currency, but all in the currencies of all liberal democracies. This will reduce the cost of transaction, increase market access and fair trade, and encourage businesses across the world to adopt a responsible capitalism while keeping liberal values in the central global trade. The final word, I want to say that we're at a time where our values as democracies are being challenged. Growing gap between the rich and the poor is creating distrust in the very institutions our democracy is founded on. Fake news, deliberate misinformation has already resulted in increased protectionism and growth of populism, all which are resulting in even less functioning markets. So I want to end my speech by saying, I still believe capitalism is the solution and not the problem, but only if we all act responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ozan. Thank you very much. And this is a really interesting and important approach that we will take during the discussion. I would like to once again encourage you to ask questions, and we are more than 50 here, so it's not going to be possible for us to ask questions directly. So please kindly use the chat, and I will then put those questions to the panelists, address them either to generally or to specific panelists. Both are fine. So next, we have a serial entrepreneur from Lithuania, and I'm really happy to introduce Dovydas Varkulevicius. He is CEO of Informed Debtor, and he started his first business at the age of 16, and since then has started 4 different businesses. So Dovydas, what is your take on the topic?
As well, thanks for introduction, Vilius. It's a pleasure to be here.
Dovydas, I'm sorry, you are very silent right now. Could you please go closer to the microphone?
Yeah, is it better? It's better. Okay. So sorry for the probably my microphone. So coming back, just briefly present me. I'm not only the serial entrepreneur, but a policypreneur. I've been serving for Enterprise Lithuania for 5 years, between 2011 to 2016, where I've been working with startups and other entrepreneurs. I've been the director of entrepreneurship partner director for Enterprise Lithuania. I founded Startup Lithuania with my co-teammates, as well as being the chairman of Private Equity and Venture Capital Association. So, but coming back from idea as well, I've worked in insurance business, and I'm currently dealing with the banks. So I have a background quite for around more than 20 years in business, either doing myself or being employed. But I want to take a different look because you invited the pirate to talk on the social responsibility, as we're dealing with the debts basically, and that's a very different corner because of Asta is she really want to be talking informed debtor business and how sociable and responsible it is. So surprisingly that you would employ the pirate to make the seas more secure, and hopefully that is, because just in the starting of the quarantine and pandemic in Europe, we helped numerous businesses to recover their debts because there were some unresponsible entrepreneurs in the foreign countries, because we mainly dealing with cross-border debt because we are an eBay of basically of the debt ocean. So we helped free of charge for either Lithuanian or UK businesses to recover the debt from unresponsible entrepreneurs in other countries. I won't be mentioning the countries. I won't be mentioning entrepreneurs, but it was millions of euros recovered free of charge because we did it on the free of charge, and our partners, which are very, very pre-selected, and have licenses to operate either in the countries we operate, either in England and France or any other country we work, as far as the Australia. So all of them have licenses and have a prior experience, and they work only by the local law requirements. As well, I wanted to just briefly touch on a question that in Lithuania we have probably, I should say, the debt recovery market Wild West. Why? And because we have more than for such a small country, we have more than 200 debt recovery companies. Yes, that's a lot. Looking at market size, and we have none of whatsoever of any standards put in the market as UK has. So I hopefully that the new government which coming into now, this week probably they swear in, hopefully will in coming 2 or 3 years the Ministry of Justice would put an end to this Wild West in the debt recovery. But what I want to say, the banks we're working or payment companies we're working and which has numerous debt issues, and once again talking about cross-border debt, because we have a lot of people escaping their debt instead of paying it, right? That's why we are here for. But I want to say that all the companies acting now very responsibly, looking at the local law and social guidelines. And as well, what I'm very happy about that the market itself is very starting being integrated in Europe, right? Because just a couple of years ago, you would find some Spanish company not paying to Lithuanian customer, not delivering the goods or services. And what we're seeing now, we're seeing that even in the midst of this pandemic, because of this, there is such enabler as informed debtor. We're not the only ones in the market. The companies starting to be more educated. That's the first thing, because they understand that if they're not paying for some of the businesses, the business is getting bust. That means they go for bankruptcy, and the people fall out of work. Of course, some of people receive social benefits. But on the contrary, they stand in the line still for these benefits, and then for them it's harder to find the work. That's the first thing. The second thing as well, it's a pity that UK is falling out of Brexiting out of Europe. Sorry, not falling out, Brexiting out of Europe, because UK was a forefront runner in all these financial regulations, and they were the leader putting the standards in Europe. And as well, speaking from my standpoint, is that regulation of Europe that it is now on the debt recovery order, which stands, it's it just, comes as a kind of recommendation to a local law, but it doesn't imply, just SAP recovery process as or whatever. So, there are a lot of different issues talking about the debt recovery. But the good things, what happened, basically, all the Europe, it become very humane. So even the former solicitors now working under very, very strict guidelines. There is no rip-off anymore, as was used to be on the administration fees and whatsoever, where you can see your debt triple, quadruple, or getting high many times, higher than it has to be. And there is a possibilities to repay the debt or refinance the debt in the European Union, so to speak. And there is a lot of financial sectors initiatives have took it. Coming back idea just to for informed debtor is.
I'm very sorry, we are out of time. So please.
Just a closing, Vilius, just a closing remark. We are such a put the guidelines in the company to saying that we will not pursue any single debt which has been gained an ethical way, right? So we have a golden standard in a company of code of conduct. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dovydas, and apologies for these interruptions, but well, I think it's part of my job, and Asta won't invite me if I don't do it again. So last, but by far not least, we have a honorary guest, Mr. Bashir Ahmed. Mr. Ahmed is the president of the British Bangladesh Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And he has a long career and a lot of experience in various countries, which he has kindly agreed to share with us. So please, the floor is yours. We cannot hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Excellency, the Honorable British Ambassador, distinguished panel members. Very good afternoon and greeting from London. It is really indeed a great pleasure for me, and especially thank you to Asta to inviting me to attend this very privileged responsible capitalism, social responsibility. We very politely used to use the word CSR activities among the corporate world. We heard excellent remarks from various panel speakers. Let me just give a little bit briefing about the British Bangladesh Chamber of Commerce and the diaspora community. The BBCCI was established in 1991 to promote the bilateral trade and investment with both of our esteemed nation. And then I can assure the Excellency and our panel, this is from the founding days. It's a not-for-profit organization, fully funded by the board of directors. British Bangladeshi Chamber, the diaspora community, we have a 700,000 population in UK with fourth generation, and contributing 4.5 billion pound at the British economy, and as the second largest SME in this country, creating job and employment for more than 200,000 people. As we all know, United Kingdom have one of the best infrastructure in the world, enriched with multicultural society, and you could hear over 300 different languages around the London city. And service industry in the UK, economic GBA output is 80% and employing 82% from the total workforce. As a British Bangladeshi Chamber of Commerce, the collective investment we have so far in Bangladesh and United Kingdom is almost 70% of the businesses actually with the sector which we call it very unfriendly towards the climate and towards the industrialization, which it may affect the climate resources in Bangladesh and here. Especially the consortium of my company itself, we are working since last 10 years, investing with the various international consortium of investors in the renewable energies, and that shows the ethical part of our organization. And as a member of the British Chamber of Commerce in the United Kingdom, and this type of the seminars actually enrich the our investors group, and I'm sure in near future we would like to take part this type of event. It would be win-win for all of the nation. My sincere gratitude to Asta and the BCCL for this opportunity, and looking forward to work together for the benefit of our esteemed nations. And thank you very much hearing me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kind words. So now we are almost at the hour, and I'm told by Asta that we are allowed to stay on for 30 minutes extra if we want, and I'm sure that the discussion would be interesting. I hope the speakers and the participants can stay on. And also thank you very much to Jūrate, who asked a question in the chat. So Jūrate is so far the only one, so please also put your questions in, and of course I also have questions, so panelists will be kept busy. And Jūrate is asking a very relevant question: what are the KPIs? How do you measure how responsible you are? And that's a really interesting angle, and we heard, just to remind ourselves, we heard, for example, from Tony, what segments they were looking at, where they have to be responsible, you know, the 5 stages of the project. We also heard some other types of how do they measure. So who from the panelists, who would like to take this question? What are the best KPIs for responsibility, either from your experience or from what you saw in other companies? And any volunteers on this? Yes, Asta, please. Absolutely, thank you.
So, you know, at Aviva, we have really well-developed set of KPIs in different areas of social responsibility for caring to every stakeholder. So in some areas, it's more straightforward. For example, if we take environment, so of course, it's easier to measure like carbon emission, recycling, energy consumption, also attitude towards investment into responsible businesses. Some areas less straightforward, but one of the topics which we really did not touch upon today, I realized that I'm the only female speaker in this panel. So certainly inclusion of different people, inclusion of women, of different orientation people, so balanced employee constitution, also share women in senior positions, for example. And in general, we can go area by area, and these KPIs are developed and discussed. But overall, for me personally, as a CEO of the company, it's very important what our people think, how they value their organization. So every year we ask this question in our independent survey: do you see Aviva as socially responsible, environment-friendly, directed towards communities? So I'm really proud to say that, for example, last year, 90% of our people said that yes, they think we are a responsible business. So I think this is one of the most important measures. Also, I believe we shall ask this to our customers, because it's most important how we are seen and valued for our major stakeholders.
Thank you, Asta. Anybody else would like to contribute on this measurement part? No, okay. So maybe I will raise a question, because I think this is what also some of the speakers mentioned. Some perceive that social responsibility or a responsible behavior of business means reduction of profit. And in his article 1970, Milton Friedman was actually criticizing social responsibility for this reason. He said this can only be done by an owner, and anybody else would be putting his own personal agenda and paying for it with somebody else's money. And of course, on the other extreme, 50 years on, we have now again in New York's time, obviously Pope Francis from another angle. But so is responsible capitalism, does it mean expenditure, or does it mean serving the society by serving your shareholders a little bit less? It's a bit provocative, but I thought it's an interesting angle to take. Who would like to take this question?
I can answer it from my point of view, at least.
Please, Ozan. Yes.
I see this the same way as paying your corporate tax. First of all, make sure that you pay your taxes in the country you operate in and avoid doing tax arbitration between offshore and onshore. That's number one. And then you can just ask yourself, as a citizen, I pay my taxes in the country I live in, where I study, where I go to the hospital, on the roads I use, and so on and so forth. So if you as a responsible capitalist see that investing in your staff, in their ecosystem, in the environment, in the very foundation of your business is a profit reducing measure, then I think you're missing the bigger picture here. Yes, your profit maybe on short term might not be as big as you expect, but if you are responsible, you look at the long-term results. Investing in your staff, investing in where you operate, have the gain because you're creating the very platform you're operating from. So I don't believe that whoever wrote that article back in the days understand how globalization and how interconnected societies, human beings, and modern technology is today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ozan. Anybody else would like to contribute on it? Yes, Joost, please. And then Tony is next.
Yeah, I would also like to just, speaking for myself, I agree with Ozan, is that the words of Milton Friedman, you need to look at them in the context when they were written and sort of his experiences after the Second World War, also his fellow ideologist Schage. They were operating in completely different context. I think today's context is you cannot avoid looking at it in a more holistic way, where we now know that we live in a world that has boundaries in terms of its environmental, let's say, capacity to absorb what we do, but also from a social point of view, from a governance point of view. And I agree with Ozan. It's that I think it makes complete business sense to realize that as a successful business and a long-term successful business, you need to operate within those sets of boundaries. So it's not about sort of taking a short-term loss to be good for the environment. No, I think it makes complete business sense to think much longer term and to look at the world as a whole and not just at your own business as if you were operating in a vacuum. So that's my bit. Thank you,
Joost. Tony, please.
Yeah, I was going to really say that it's not quite so black and white in my view. It very much varies on the type of business that you operate. If you look at, for ourselves, example, we work from project to project. So if we invest more money to be socially responsible and to do environmental saving in building a project, it costs us a lot of money. And that ultimately comes off at the bottom line, so we make less profit. That I think is a clear fact. It then comes down to whether we, the board, are willing to do the right thing, and it comes down to, I think, a personal choice, and of course, if you've got enough profit to be able to do that. So I think there's some other factors involved, but generally, if you can and people are willing, I think we should, and we're moving, I hope, further towards that sort of principle.
Thank you, Tony. Anybody else would like to?
Yeah,
Yes,
I would also.
Asta and then Ambassador. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I believe it is important to find the right balance between different stakeholders, because this is crucial in today's business, really. Basically, as it was mentioned, you cannot survive long term, but also it goes even against the law, against morale, if you only take financial interest into account. For example, in operating in financial retail sector, as I said, you shall put your customer first, and you shall put also first the environment you are operating, the society. Otherwise, you will not be seen as an acceptable provider of services. So this is direct interest of the business to balance. But of course, to be a sustainable continuing business, you have to make profit. Otherwise, you are just not viable in the society. But I believe just financial profit maximization doesn't work really alone.
Thank you, Asta. Mr. Ambassador, please.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And I agree absolutely with what Ozan was just saying about the short-term profit versus long-term sustainable growth. I mean, I think this comes completely to the heart of what we're discussing. And it's all very well as talking about corporate social responsibility, ESG criteria, how we can measure them, what KPIs we're using, but ultimately it's about purpose and our relationships between the employees, the suppliers, society, and as I said in my opening remarks, are we genuinely guardians for future generations? And these may seem very sort of lofty ambitions, but if we're happy to be a company, a business which is going to make a short-term profit over the next 3 or 4 years, then obviously what we were saying back in 1970 is probably valid. But actually, if we want to have a long-term business and long-term growth, then clearly all these other criteria come into play.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, really, and I think this is really interesting, and you know, a bit of defense of Milton Friedman, and of course I realize this is 50 years ago, but I think some points he made are still made today. If you read international business press, and they are also valid points. I mean, how do you decide on investing in the shares in the market? You invest in the shares that will bring the biggest growth, and that is return. So there is this pressure, and that so is that. But on the other hand, obviously, this is not black and white. This is not always a choice. Your company versus the society. It's actually both and that's the balance to be found. We have an interesting question from Leila, actually, and if we so how do you determine your own employees to be socially responsible? If I understand correctly the question, so how do you communicate to your employees that well, this is the important thing to do, that this is okay, so if we at the top, the C-suite believes that socially responsible action is important, how do you deliver the message to the team? Who would like to start with this one?
So I can start.
Asta, thank you for being so active and forthcoming.
So basically, you know, today really you don't need to put so much effort in encouraging your employees to get engaged in social responsibility activities. They are keen to see the employer socially responsible as good corporate citizen. I believe that your image as a responsible company even helps you to attract the right people into your employees. group. And basically today, I think it is to your advantage if you have a story to tell even before employment. And then, of course, every day you communicate with your people, and this sense of joint effort and joint activities, and then the result you achieve, you see, of course, you need to put effort and you need to engage people, but basically today's society, and especially younger generation, is really keen to participate in social activities, to be responsible. And of course, you know, in every company you can find more skeptical people, more negative approach, but then it comes to overall general management principles. So I believe it is really now not such a hard task if you do it, you know, systemically, if you say what you do. And of course, on the top management is always lays responsibility that you should act in according to the values you declare, because nobody wants to believe in words. People want to follow, to be engaged if they see like honest approach, if they see that you personally do what you say. And really, as I said, as Aviva, we were really pioneers in these activities. And for example, when we started these spring cleaning campaigns, so almost nobody did in Lithuania. It was before our Darom actions and so on. And all this voluntary, you know, rubbish collection, it's not such a pleasant task. And back then, like 15 years ago, it was a task to get people motivated to gather after office hours and to go to clean surroundings around our office building, for example. But somehow, if they see that you engage yourself into this, you believe is needed, people get engaged one by one. And if you create this environment, so then somehow you don't feel well if you are excluded from this joint effort. But of course, it's a work. Every day is management work. That's it.
Yes,
from me.
thank you, Asta. Thank you. Actually, this is also our experience, especially with the young people. It's not the problem that you have to persuade them to follow a purpose. It's a problem if they don't find a sufficiently purpose in your business. So, any other thoughts on Leila's question? Yes, Joost, please.
Yeah, I would like to emphasize the points that Asta was making. And the role of leadership. I think, you know, your corporate values are a very important guideline in sort of illustrating what behaviors you're expecting from your employees. And as leadership, you need to live those values, and you need to lead by example, and that is critical. And you know, it is difficult because we're all humans, but it is critical to set these examples every day. And I cannot emphasize that enough. You know, taking that responsibility as leadership of a business, whether it's a small business or a large business.
Yes, thank you, Joost. We have I think it's not a question, it's a contribution from Hamid, who is saying capitalism whose responsibility is only towards the shareholders and its main aim is only profit maximization is destined to create so many societal ills that it will be the noose around the neck of humanity and life. That's strongly put. Yeah, Adam Smith wouldn't agree, but I think now today more and more of us would. Yes, Mr. Ambassador.
I think this is a great example, as we were just hearing about what behaviors do organizations expect from their employees. This is a great example we just heard, you just read out, of what behaviors the employees expect of us. Certainly a purpose-driven organization, I agree entirely with what Asta has just been saying. It's far easier to have to attract talent, to attract the right sort of talent, people who are passionate about their work, Although I work for an organization which is not profit and loss driven, it is more driven from the public sector as a diplomat on justifying expenditure paid for by taxpayers. Therefore, I nonetheless have to keep a very careful eye on exactly what we're doing and how we can justify that expenditure. And I'm very lucky in that much of what we do around the world is very much worth getting out of bed for. It's very purpose driven when you know that you have done something which has helped a country fight corruption. It's put people into a humanitarian crisis. It's helped businesses generate profit in a good, responsible way. So those things I find from our employees are demanded of me, and as a consequence, we benefit hugely from the talent that we can attract.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Any other contributions on this? Yeah, okay, we have another question, which is a little bit in the same vein, but also I would think maybe about a different angle. Simona is asking, how do you prioritize the causes your company is supporting or taking responsibility in? In other words, how do you choose your causes? So that's an interesting question in the sense that it's about those. Not directly that the business that we do directly, yes, it's the things that we support in addition to the business. How to best choose them? Any advice? Any comments on this? Joost, thank you.
That's going to be my last thing. No, I think that the when you sort of differentiate between the causes that your company sort of supports and the purpose of your company, I like to think that you need to keep those things as closely as possible. Is that I think any organization, hopefully, when they have a license to operate as a business, is that they in some shape or form their company is the purpose of the company is providing a benefit to society, whether it's providing finance, whether it's providing services, etc. But there needs to be a sort of an element of a societal benefit. So therefore, if that is the purpose of your organization, I think to make things come to life in your organization, to keep it sustainable, the more you choose the courses that you support in line with your company's purpose, I think the more credible you are, and also the more motivational it is for your team members. So I'd like to think the closer you keep it, the more powerful it is.
Thank you, Joost. Yeah, so to choose it by choosing the one that's most aligned with your core business. Who would like to contribute more to this? Asta? Or
I can say, of course, related to business, but also, if you talk about your business being as good citizens, so then you should also look at the society. So basically, we make our strategy of our responsibility. And for example, if we decide that now we will focus on elderly people, so we follow this strategy for 2 years, 3 years, whatever we decide. And it's not such an easy task. I understand why this question is raised, because there are so many ways to contribute, to do, especially when you talk about donations or about activities you engage your people in. You cannot go every second day to social activities with your people, let's be fair, but you want to help disadvantaged children, you want to help elderly, you want to help pets foster, and many different things you can do and you want to do, but sometimes you have to learn to say no to some activities, because focus, like everywhere, strategy focus is important. So I think it is very important to set some target and to have some boundaries, and if you focus, you have more effect with your activities, with your contributions. Otherwise, you know, it can become like sometimes in political world a bit everywhere, but no effect at all. So I wish everyone to find the right target for your input.
Thank you, Asta. Thank you. Yeah, I think, well, now we are closing to getting close to using up also not only the time allotted, but also the time of patience of our listeners. So if I may ask all the panelists to conclude with a very short 2 sentences, what you would like to the audience to take from this. As this kind of a last round. So, Mr. Ambassador, if you would like to start this round.
Thank you. Well, my conclusion from the debate, which I found very interesting, and thank you for all the contributors, is that as one of the panelists said, I am convinced that capitalism is part of the answer, but it has to be the right sort of capitalism, and absolutely agree that from the practical experience around the world, that we need business and capitalism to succeed for successful and for strong economies. We can create as many diplomats and as many civil servants as we like, but that will not create a strong economy. We need business and we need profit, but we need responsible capitalism.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Tomas?
Yes, I think responsible capitalism is a long journey. There are very good examples, different initiatives that companies are taking. But capital works in the area of supply and demand. So if there is sufficient demand from the customers of responsibility towards the companies who are selling the products, immediately the businesses will adapt. So I think it's also educational element, changes of generation, which will contribute to that, and we'll end up there inevitably.
Thank you, Tomas. Thank you for the optimism. Asta? Asta, I think you're on mute.
Yes. So as business managers, of course, we have to make money, and we are also responsible and perhaps still primarily responsible to our investors. However, this profit making only shall be when we are pro-customer in our operations and generating return to every stakeholder, being it employee, partner, supplier, community. As it was mentioned in this discussion, also shall hear about the generations who will live after us in this planet.
Thank you, Asta. Tony?
Yes, of course, we must have responsible capitalism, and it's definitely the way to go. I feel, though, that we're sometimes on an uphill struggle, and we really need to have strong guidance and rules and regulations set in place by all governments, and all governments working together to have the same rules.
Thank you, Tony. Joost?
Yes, thank you, Vilius. I'm extremely pleased that we're having this debate today. I think that in itself is a sort of positive development. I like to think about the sort of discussion between, let's say, profit only and responsible capitalism is kind of pendulum, and sort of the what started in the sort of early 80s of moving towards, let's say, the Milton Friedman way of thinking. I think particularly since COVID crisis, but a few years before that, the pendulum started sort of going the other direction, and I think we still have a long way to go. But I think more and more people are realizing that responsible capitalism is the way to go, and it doesn't mean that that capitalism is out. No, it's there, but it needs to change and adapt to the reality that we're in today. Is that if we want to have a long-term healthy society and planet, we need to do things differently. So thank you to BCCL, Asta, and Vilius for organizing this event. I thought it was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Joost. Ozan.
There you go. Thank you. No, I appreciate being invited, and I appreciate all the views that have been shared today. I believe making us aware of the challenge is the first step, to acknowledge the problem and the challenge, and take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ozan. Dovydas, I don't see Dovydas, but yeah, he may have disconnected. Okay, so Mr. Ahmed.
Yes, thank you. I fully agree with Excellency's assessment. We need to be profitable and, of course, responsible capitalism. I can, last but not least, I would like to provide you information as a small diaspora like a Bangladeshi community. As an example of last year, we sent 1.2 billion to Bangladesh. And very proudly and loudly, I can say 75% of that money goes to good work and philanthropical work in Bangladesh. So we make money, of course, we need to contribute, give back. So as we are used to say in our board meeting always, the power and wealth comes with the responsibility. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Thank you very much once again to everyone. And really, this has been a really very rich discussion in ideas. And just maybe to conclude from what we heard, well, it is responsible capitalism is still capitalism. So it's not a choice between being responsible and being a good citizen and making profit or being successful. After all, profit is a measure for value that we create with our business, and that value, if it is a useful business for the society, which all of our businesses are, is very important and is also a big contribution to the society. So, this is a really interesting discussion. I think it will go on, and I think. I'm sure that the listeners today who have joined, and I would like to, on behalf of all of us to also thank them for joining, will have taken some ideas to their companies and to their businesses. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much to the panel. It was an honor to be with you this afternoon. And I hope we'll have more such discussions and we meet there. So thank you very much and have a very good evening today.
Thank you very much, Vilius. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.